Welcome back, guys. This is Rodrigo Fonador with another episode of the Asheville Real Estate News Podcast. Really excited to talk about a whole bunch of things. I'm not really 100% sure what the details look like on this. So I think we're going to be talking about leadership inside of organizations, inside of your own personal life a little bit as well, talking about how you relate to your employees and what maybe your roles as a leader are as you're growing a team and how to do a good job of bringing people along with you. And we'll find out. So today I'm joined by Chris Maslin with the Biltmore Company, right? It's not the Biltmore Estate. I was going to say.
Yeah, it's actually all of the above. So I work with Biltmore Company here, Biltmore Estate, as well as Biltmore Center for Professional Development.
Awesome. So I think the Biltmore Company or the Biltmore entity is one of those, the more you're in Asheville, the more you realize how much the Biltmore umbrella encompasses. Yeah. I know when I first moved here, I was like, just the Biltmore Estate. And then I ended up working downtown in the offices of Pack Square. And, is that where that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, so when Chris and I first were like, we've seen each other before. And so that's true. I guess that's probably why.
Downtown headquarters.
But then I was like, holy cow, you guys do a little bit of everything. I'd really love to hear how you got involved into the organization and then maybe what your progression inside of the organization has led you to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with the company about 12 years now and started kind of a niche role overseeing our learning and development. Specifically, and that role has grown over my career now to oversee all of our recruitment and hiring for the company. We have 2,500 employees. And then I also can still oversee learning and development internally. I also coordinate our strategic planning for the company, as well as oversee external training and consulting business called Biltmore Center for Professional Development.
When you first got started with the company, what were you doing?
I was just focused on learning and development, in particular, a little bit of organizational development.
And have you always been in Asheville, or how did you end up calling this place home?
Yeah, so I've been in Asheville now 20 years. It's certainly home. I've been here longer than anywhere else in my life, or lived here longer than anywhere else in my life. But moved here from East Tennessee.
Okay. And when you moved here, were you moving here just seeing what happens, or did you know you were going to be working with Biltmore?
No, when I was
Well, I guess you've only been with Biltmore 12 years, so what did you do before that?
Right, yeah, so I've had a varied career. Started coming up my connection to the area. My grandparents built a house here in the 60s, and so started coming up as a kid and just fell in love with the area. And so I actually started at the University of Tennessee, transferred schools here locally, finished up college, and hung around, did a variety of jobs. Actually worked in finance as well as camp director at Ridgecrest Summer Camps down the road. And that was kind of my transitional job, oddly enough, into this. So you never know where your career path is going to take you.
Yeah, well, I kind of referenced that working in the Pack Square office.
Yeah.
And I got there before I was working for an attorney who had an office there. I was serving tables, and an attorney and his manager came in. And they're like, oh, your name's Rodrigo. Do you speak Spanish? I was like, I do, actually, yes. And they're like, really? Do you want to come in and interview on Monday? I was like, wow. Yes, I will be there Monday. And it was just, the most randomest thing that you just never know sometimes how those dots all end up connecting.
Yeah, I love hearing people's story like that, especially.
I think it's fun. So what's your actual title? Because I was asking you before we got started so I could introduce you properly, and I realized I'd probably just embarrass myself in the process. But I'd love. What is your actual title? And yeah, I guess what's the day-to-day for what you do look like?
Yeah, so it is one of those silly corporate titles, I feel like, but it's the Senior Director of Talent and Organizational Development. And so, my day-to-day is overseeing those 4 or 5 areas that I mentioned at the lead of the interview. But most of the day-to-day really is, and this is like the very corporate part of what I do. And I spend a lot of time in meetings, both attending and leading meetings, and I lead a lot of learning and development activities, again, both internally and externally. And then outside of that, I'm working on specific project management within the company.
It seems like you've got a couple of different rotating plates, as they say, that you're spinning.
Definitely.
Which one's your favorite one?
Oh man, it's a hard question. I think at this point I'm really loving just getting to work with our owners and our senior leadership on strategic planning. And so we do, of course, some long-range strategic planning. And, for your listeners, I'm sure it's interesting as they think about the future of their business and, where they're going to go. Of course, we love to think about the long-term horizon, and we're a fifth-generation family-owned business. With that being said, when you're doing any sort of long-range strategic planning, you're lucky if you could think 10 years out. And when we do that work, we are planning 10 years out with the expectation that all we can really plan for is about 3 years, because the landscape is just changing so rapidly. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of pull that back, of course, into annual strategic plans. So I think right now that's probably something that just gives me tons of energy and passion. And I'm seeing the fruit of that, especially as the company has just grown so much. I mean, we just had a record-breaking year.
That's awesome.
Just a lot of fun things coming. Just finished up the Chihuly exhibit last year and opened up a new conference center. We have the Downton exhibit coming, and new statewide transportation project underway. So they're while we are over 120 years old, we're just continually evolving and looking for new ways to break into new markets.
So Nolan, who you met here, who produces that, we were at a conference this weekend, and one of the guys who was speaking, just totally thinking about this. Now he said, your company should always be looking to add, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's a new product, a service every 6 to 12 months.
Wow.
And it sounds like you all are doing that, and I'm wondering if you feel that that's been accurate in your last 10 to 12 years that you've been at Biltmore, and if it is accurate that you feel like you guys are always bringing in new products, services, do you feel like that's been intentional, or it's just a byproduct of the history that the company has?
Yeah, it's a great, I think, goal and directive, and I would certainly encourage companies to continue to look at that as you're thinking about evolving and, again, staying ahead of the competition. I do think that Biltmore has done an exceptional job of that. I think partly that's dictated by the market, in the sense that the majority of our business is a historic attraction.
Right.
And that being said, we've got to bring people back. So it's not enough to get them to visit once, and that dictates building building out new exhibits and reasons for them to return. So a lot of things that are seasonal, or I mentioned Chihuly and Downton. They're coming. So things like that are actually always coming online. And then new products and services. We've certainly done that as well as I think about some of the physical plant of the estate with new hotel, as I mentioned, new conference center, and now moving towards really trying to make sure we get our guests where we'd like them to be. I mean, when we need them to be there with this new statewide transportation project, and that's really just designed to enhance the guest experience and make their visit all the better.
And talking about the guest experience, right? Yeah. You do a lot of that focus when it comes to building out and working with the employees and the team side of things, right? Did I understand that correctly, right?
Yeah.
So have you always been working with people obviously you said Camp Ridgecrest. I did camp for 10 years of my life. Some of the best experiences, I'm always if you're going to do camp, you should. Yeah. But have you always, I guess the question really is, how have you always been in that position where you're kind of working with people to hey, show up well, what do you need? How can we help you do what you want, or things of that nature, if that question makes sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And each of my career stops getting here, it's certainly been about the guest experience and making sure, and that really begins as I think about what we do at Biltmore now. I mean, we focus first on making sure that the internal guest experience is 100% every single day. And when we talk about the internal guest experience, we're talking about what are the relationships that matter most when you think about the stakeholders that are most important to your effectiveness and success. That's where the internal guest experience really begins. And you can't provide an exceptional or world-class external guest experience unless you first focus on the internal guest experience. And so we really focus on culture building and how we build teams and nurture those teams so that our folks can really provide that external guest service. But yeah, it's a touch point. We train heavily on that from day one with our new employees. And then also, again, with the external business that we run with Biltmore Center for Professional Development. That's a cornerstone program for us. It's actually one that we've trademarked the name because we believe that our brand of hospitality is so exceptional. We call it gracious hospitality. And so there are a lot of specific elements that make up that recipe.
So the Biltmore Center for Professional Development, right?
Yes.
That is your all's branch that goes out and teaches other businesses or whatnot how to embody this gracious hospitality. I mean, obviously they're going to have their own name associated with it, but at least the approach.
Yes, absolutely right. And so, that business was started really Over 10 years ago, we just saw this need, and so my boss tasked me to look at ways to make sure that we are extending our brand and thinking about ways to, of course, build our profit centers. And so we had been getting requests for how do you do what you do, stuff forever. And there's a point at which you can only do that in your free time as much as you can, and you have to decide we either say no or we're going to make a business out of it. And so we made a business out of it. But yeah, the cornerstone program that we deliver is certainly Gracious Hospitality. And then a number of the other programs within that are focused on leadership and cultivating change, and also we employee engagements. These are all topics that we believe are fundamental to our brand and what we do well, and so that's what we share with others.
Well, I want to touch on the leadership thing, but first,
absolutely.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, if you were going to summarize or really do like the 1-sentence, 30-second, what is it about the Biltmore experience or the Gracious Hospitality, without using Gracious Hospitality, that just makes it, like, why did people want to learn from you all? Like, what were they seeing in different words, I guess? Or can you expand on what that actually means?
Yeah, I believe, first and foremost, that they are experiencing something that is, when I think about the customers who are coming to us, they're experiencing something that's radically different than what they've experienced elsewhere.
Yeah.
So they're transported back in time when they come to the estate. When we provide this oasis experience, that's really what we seek to provide for our guests here. And the only way we want to do that is through Gracious Hospitality and seeking to have a +1 mindset with every single employee. So that's what we seek to instill in them. And we do that with really a purpose-driven business model that connects to their own individual purpose.
Right. Okay. And how does that play out internally with your all's employees then?
Yeah. It's a great question. And so we start, I mentioned purpose.
Yeah.
And I imagine for most of your listeners, they have a great purpose in what they do in terms of real estate, and they're helping people find this home that could be a place where they make memories, and they really establish it as home. And so for us, we see the same. We want to have a purpose beyond making money or just increasing shareholder value. So we have the big picture why of what Biltmore does, which is all about the preservation of Biltmore Estate, for hopefully 5 more generations and then some. But we want our employees to connect with that on a deep personal level. So from day one, we begin asking them about their own personal why. Why Biltmore? Why the position that they chose? And then how does that link back to this idea of preservation through Gracious Hospitality? So we really hammer that, and we believe that's our competitive advantage. And if you look at any work behind that, and any research behind that, Jim Collins and Good to Great and Built to Last, you're looking at 1,900% more social media mentions and 10 times earning revenue when you're looking at companies that actually get purpose and they help connect that down to the front line.
I think, I love reading, and you mentioned some good books. And what's the process that you all go through to take something that's, a really abstract concept, right? Of well, what's your why? And that's talked a lot about, but you all have done a good enough job, obviously, where other companies are coming to you and saying, hey, how did you do that? And so how did you do that? What is, besides just drilling it down, but are there any, do you all look for specific people, or is it anybody who comes in, as long as they're open to it, the culture just envelops them? Or I guess, what are the moving pieces to really be able to get somebody to be vulnerable and honest with you and be like, yeah, this is really why I'm here?
Yeah. Well, it certainly begins with, the selection process for us. And that question of why Biltmore is so critical. And I think anyone that's looking to hire, someone's got to ask why company XYZ, what actually drew you to that? And hopefully they have a way to articulate that in a meaningful way. But for us, the other essential element is recognizing that, if your company has spent time really thinking about who they are and how they show up in the marketplace, they've and who they want to be culturally. I think they've spent time identifying their core values. So not only their why, their mission, but their organizational core values. And so for us in the interview process, selection process, we are really trying to understand through a variety of very dialed-in questions that we've cultivated through the years to understand what are those person's core values that they show up with, a candidate. And so we're trying to understand those, and what is the alignment with the organization's core values. Because if we know those and those guardrails for their decision-making and their behaviors, and if they align with Biltmore's core values, then we'll know they're a good fit. Outside of any technical skills that they bring to the table, outside of their educational background, if they went to some great school, if we can find that kind of fit, we know that we can train them to be an exceptional member of our team.
What are Biltmore's core values?
So I'll give you the rundown, and we have 8, and so my personal opinion is it's too many, but I didn't make them.
But do you know all 8 though? Okay, good.
Yeah, and they were developed long before I was with the company. I would say for anybody that's listening, I would encourage you to dial it into 3. But yeah, so ours are community service, hospitality, integrity, profitability, teamwork, authenticity, quality, and leadership. And so we, again, spend a lot of time really making sure that our employees understand those core values. And we work through case studies of those core values. We work through just many different training programs as well that help them understand how those connect to their daily work.
I know I promised I wouldn't put you on the spot. So we can skip over this question, but it's not. We'll find out. If you had to pick which 3 of those 8 you would go with, have you just off the cuff, which of those 3 of the 8 would you choose? You said encourage somebody to go with 3.
That's a great question, and it's something I have thought about. Again, it's because I teed up the 3 core values piece.
Yeah.
So for me, I'd certainly say you would lead off with integrity. And I can go into my short definitions for each of these if you really want. But
no, please, because I think it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. So integrity, for us is all about the idea that it's character when no one is looking. So doing the right thing no matter what. Secondly, there are 2 different ways that Biltmore kind of looks at this, but it's authenticity. That would be another one that's huge for me. And I think there's the authenticity, and for your listeners, this is important, and I believe it for myself, but no one's going to want to follow someone that's fake and superficial, and you see right through those people, because we're all looking for a genuine relationship when we think about a leader to employee or just at a peer level. So that's like one layer of authenticity. But the other layer that's so critical for Biltmore and what we do in terms of this is where core values come in with decision making, is we run it through that filter to say, is this new product, is this new service authentic to Biltmore's brand and history? So you're never going to see a roller coaster on the grounds of Biltmore, right, because it's not authentic to our story. So those are 2 layers again to authenticity that I think are important for us as a company. And third, it's interesting, but I actually think profitability, and some of our folks kind of wince at that when we mention it as a core value, but it's so essential because our 3rd generation owner, William Cecil, who just recently passed, he was famous for saying within our company, he said, we don't preserve Biltmore Estate to make money. We make money to preserve Biltmore Estate. And our reality, and
that's
the reality,
yeah,
it's so critical, and we talk about that all the time, especially as we share that with our employees and help them think about their personal impact towards profitability every single day. But why that's so important, especially as I think about your listeners, many of who are running their own business, is if they're not keeping an eye on the bottom line and profitability, of course they will cease to exist. So they know that, and I'm sure they're watching cash flow. But it's really nice to develop all sorts of products and new business lines and everything we're talking about here. Think a 6 to 12 month new cycle or whatever the case might be. But if you're not analyzing those business models and not paying attention, it doesn't matter how great your mission is if you can't keep it alive.
Yeah, you can't execute something that doesn't exist, essentially. And I'm assuming that it takes an insane amount of money to maintain the Biltmore Estate the way that you all do, because it's always looks so good. It's a really interesting dynamic of just the way you word something and the importance of or the power of taking the time to really understand what you're about.
Yeah.
When you guys are going through this process, right, like it's got to be something that starts at the top, right? So I'd really love to kind of just hear your opinion or just talk a little bit about your all's ethos when it comes to leadership inside of Biltmore, and then how you all explain or share that to other people.
Yeah. So it's interesting as you chose the words there of it starts at the top, and that really does begin in a very tangible way. For us, with the first day of employment for any new Biltmore team member, our CEO comes and spends a good 45 minutes with every single
each person.
With a new class of orientation class.
Okay.
And he shares a little bit of the family side of the business, but also around mission and core values, and he highlights that through some stories of where he's seen those core values show up. And I think that's one of those things that really puts a stamp on that first day of an experience for an employee, where they go, wow, okay, this is different. And you look at research now, and especially with Asheville having the lowest unemployment in the state, also the fastest growing job market, and just industry in general. Employees decide day one if they're going to stick around or not. And so we want to really make sure that first day encourages them to stick with us.
Yeah.
And so it starts there. I'm on the other front of just thinking about leadership and how we train on it, both internally and externally. Is we think about just kind of this visual of tossing a pebble out and into the water, and it's the idea that this is going to be a ripple effect that begins with you. And so there are a few stages to that. I feel like I've heard this so much in leadership kind of content lately, and speakers that I've heard, and they talk a lot about self-leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And self-leadership is so critical, but you can't lead self unless you first have self-knowledge and then self-awareness, right? And so self-knowledge begins with actually getting feedback on where you are currently. And so there are plenty of different ways that you can do that through assessments, 360s, or things like tools like the Enneagram or the Workplace Big Five. Lots of tools that we use as well to kind of get that baseline of where you are. And then one of my favorite things that I've begun asking as well is just with trusted relationships of, hey, what do you know about me that I don't know about myself that I should know? And this idea to say there's someone that's really a trusted relationship, that they're going to give me that kind of feedback, which would really be valuable enough to have a starting point. So, and then we're moving towards self-awareness so that I can begin to actually make, significant changes, to close gaps on my blind spots, but also to really leverage my strengths. And then I move into self-leadership, which then I can lead my team, which then I can lead the organization, which then I'm having an impact, in my community and all of my spheres of influence outside of the company. So that ripple effect is important, but it can't happen without starting with you.
When you are doing work with the Biltmore Center for Development and you all are going out, what do you see or what have you found to be the biggest stumbling block for a new business to embody that self-leadership and hey, let's go guys, let's do this thing together, and really to set out a vision for their team versus just hey, show up and make money, let's go?
Yeah. So good. And we've had, a number of clients through the years that I think have struggled with that. And, we're only as good as, I think, the best practices and insights that we share. We're only as good as what they actually put into practice.
Right.
And so, if we do a needs analysis, with a potential client, and it's clear, one, that they're not taking an accurate self-assessment, and two, that they don't have the courage to actually act on, the plan and the content that we're going to deliver, then we just say, hey, this is probably not going to be a great partnership. And so those two things are really critical. Those are the two roadblocks to really be specific around your question is accurate self-assessment of them as an individual, but also a snapshot of where their company is. So if they don't really understand where their company is and the roadblocks that are hurting their company as a whole, cultural issues in particular, that's where the blind spot usually is. And then that second point of to actually have the courage, as a leader, as a CEO, often who we're working with, to then say, okay, I'm willing to, accept this is where I am. I'm willing to say, hey, this is the goal where we're going, and this is what it's going to take to get there. And I'm willing to do the hard work, culturally, to get my employees on board and to, to actually cast vision in a meaningful way. Those are the two things that they matter. And if they're not willing to go there, then it's honestly a pointless exercise.
You used the word courage twice. Why that word? Why isn't that not discipline or just, I don't know, I guess, why is it courage versus anything else? The only other word I can think of right now is discipline, but it seems like courage is a very specific thing where somebody is scared of, but why are you seeing people being scared of implementing these changes? Because you all are coming from a place with track record. You have the proof of concept. You have the credibility. What's keeping people back? Then when you all go and be like, hey, look, we're really good at what we do, obviously. Here's the little nuggets of wisdom. Take them. And then people just don't. Why? Where's the disconnect, I guess?
Yeah, so for a lot of leaders that we're working with there, and the reason that I chose that word courage versus, discipline or execution or something maybe is a little bit more operationally
thank you.
oriented. Plenty of companies do that well. And you probably know plenty of folks that lead companies that are exceptionally disciplined and they get execution. They have great operational kind of practices. But when we talk about courage, it's a distinction. Again, it's a willingness to say, hey, I'm willing to take bold steps, because plenty of companies will do the same thing over and over again, and they may execute really well. They may be very disciplined about that. But to, again, address a blind spot or a gap that they have, especially when it comes to their culture or when it comes to their employee base, or, again, from the self-leadership side, to say, this is really where I have, I've got a gap in my leadership of the company, and maybe I'm not walking the talk. And often we have that conversation, of like, hey, leader, CEO, are you really willing to lead? That's the courage that I'm talking about. So he can't come in and kind of promote a program or bring us in as a consulting partner if they're not willing to walk the talk.
Do you find that there's often disconnect between a company's core values and then how the leader acts, or the founder, owner, CEO, whatever, acts? Or is that, I feel like I hear that. Honestly, it's kind of weird having this whole conversation, because I'm going to look at Nolan over here. We don't really specifically have core values. I think we've got some really clear ethos on things, but nothing that we've ever come back on and been oh, well, these are our 8 words. Would you?
Oh, I think
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
A corporation versus 2 or 3 people who have the same personal values, but expanding those values to represent, I don't know how many employees the Biltmore has, but over 100 people, right?
Yeah, 2,500.
So, wow, quite a bit over 100 people. So I think it's a little different. And, please speak on that. But
yeah, because I do want to add one thing. I do feel like we have, we're a small team, but our personal values are really overlapped. And so I don't know if that's made it lazy to develop clear, concise business values, or what. I don't know. Yeah. What do you see with small teams?
Well, you're not. It's just not uncommon. As many small teams as we've worked with, and especially, when I think about an entrepreneurial mindset that you all have here, still as you said, you have 3 people on.
There's 3 of us. Mm-hmm.
So 3 people on your team, absolutely, it's so easy when you only have 3 folks on your team. You're casting vision together, you're creating core values together, whether you call them that or not. You can communicate very easily. But where the tipping point lies, and it's to throw a specific number of employees out, of where that gets really difficult. But you see this in if you study startups. Yeah. I hear in most research it's around 50 employees, and that just gets really difficult. I would encourage you, even though you only have 3 employees, right now, take stock of where you are. Think about your history. Document some of that, but really, take a day out next time you want to do some strategic planning and give some thought to, a really meaningful why, for the company, as well as, meaningful personal whys, as well as, the organizational core values and your personal core values. And the more that you, begin to talk about that, and you bring in employee number 4 and you talk about that and you actually select employee number 4 based on that and their alignment to it, that's going to make the difference, in terms of if they are successful or not, and ultimately whether your company is successful. So, it's not unique that you all haven't spent time on that yet. You're all about, the next thing, and, keeping operations running, and, plenty of other things.
Got to keep the lights on.
It comes back to profitability. Yeah. But I think that's, it's not.
Well, that's a little bit of a eureka moment. So thank you for, drilling down on that and just expanding on that.
Yeah. I guess when you put it that way, it's never a bad thing to have core value. You can't have core values too early. Yeah. So it's, but you can have them, I guess, too late. So.
Well, and the reality is, while you said, hey, our core values and, our mission, they probably overlap, I'd be curious if you've ever actually talked about it. Have you ever actually sat down? Because the next thing is, beginning to filter, core values guiding your decision making and your behaviors, and to say, okay, well, let's think back to this specific time in our company. Where did we see our why and our core values show up? How did that happen? If you look back, that's how you could begin to really articulate it. But then, were there times where within your company's history, did you get out of step with those core values because you may have made assumptions that they were there if they hadn't been clearly defined? And that's where, again, hiring employee number 4, number 5, number 6, all the way up to however big your company's going to be. Hopefully it's going to be massively successful and have lots of wonderful folks. But that's the way that you will bring them on board, in a way that you ensure that they're fully aligned, they get it, and you're in lockstep, all stacking hands on that every day, and you're all wanting to crush it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We're gonna have to work on that. I think that would be really Like, it would be enjoyable, I think, for us.
Oh, yeah. It's super fun.
Yeah. Going to collect my thoughts on that because I started being like, okay, well, like, we need to have all these conversations now. So back to where we're at today, you know, with focusing on the self-leadership. I want to go back to that. Is that something that you all push and encourage your employees to do as well? Or is that something that's like more management team or management level, if that makes sense? So is that in everybody, like ground level up?
Yeah. It's certainly ground level up. I mean, we go way deeper as folks progress through the organization. But we start with, most importantly, that personal why from day one, and hammer that, and we make sure that our leaders are coaching on it, and that's probably the most fundamental element of self-leadership that's boiling down to the front line. But we also do focus on personal core values with the front line, and we spend a pretty good bit of time on that with them through our learning and development initiatives. We could go a good bit deeper with our leadership, and when I think about self-leadership and just the mark of a successful day, like I'll be teaching a program tomorrow for quite a few of our leaders throughout the company, and one of the things that an element of this program will be talking about what we call work-life integration. So it's not really, we don't use the term work-life balance anymore, because I don't think that that
what does
really
that even
exists.
mean? Yeah.
I mean, a lot of us think like, okay, what was that for our parents or grandparents, and like this clock in, clock out, and you don't think about work afterwards, and that's not our reality anymore. But so with this program, and to me, it's I think an absolute kind of like critical element of self-leadership is being able to look at each and every day and understand, like, was that day a success or was it not? And that begins with self. And so it's this, I'm asking these 5 questions of myself in the morning, and I'm asking myself these 5 questions in the evening. And I've actually started to do this with my family as well. So it's looking back on the day and saying first, like, did I accomplish something today that I'm super proud of?
Okay.
Like, hopefully there's something today that I did, like one thing, even if I got like the whole day was sideways, I did one thing that I'm super proud of.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, looking at joy. So did I do something today that like brought me
joy,
absolute joy, right? And that's the intersection of like a great fit for you, in terms of your career and what you're doing is that intersection of accomplishment and joy, right? But then I'm also looking at, hey, what am I exceptionally grateful for that day? And there's lots of great research now coming out about just perspective and the practice of gratitude. And I'm looking back on the day to say, what was I really grateful for, and how did that play out in my day? Then I'm looking at, what did I learn today? Hopefully I learned at least one new thing. And that could have been a learning from a failure, like an interpersonal, like relationship or a conflict I had that day. Or it could have been like I actively, learned something, through an experience or, a formal method. And then last, I'm asking myself, who did I help today and how did I help them? So if everything that I did, if I answered those first 4 questions, satisfactorily, and I feel really good about it, but, the fact is those first 4 questions were only about me and I did nothing to pay it forward, then that day was still a loss. So that's why that 5th question is so critical, that I helped someone and made an impact in a meaningful way.
And is a win or loss like all or nothing?
I don't know if it gets into an all or nothing. I mean,
personally, for you, like not necessarily like that you're putting it on other people. It's just like you personally. Are you like, got to hit these 5 and then that's the W, or if I'm missing one, right? Like, as you said, 4 out of 5 could be a loss if that fifth one's missing.
That's a great way of looking at it. And, Rodrigo, nobody's ever really asked me that when I've talked about this concept before. So, I mean, I guess personally for me, it's probably either a win or a loss.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't hit all 5 within that day, and sometimes it takes like a real drill down.
Yeah,
really
I can imagine. Yeah.
But if you begin your day and end your day, thinking about, okay, if I'm looking at the beginning of my day, like, am I intentional about how that's going to happen? And then at the end of the day, did I actually make it happen? And man, like that's super, satisfying to me as an individual and as a leader in my sphere of influence.
I think those are really good, but also like fun questions to ask, because so often, like, life is chaos. Like, we work with people all the time, and sometimes it's like things happen, and I'm always like, it's okay. Like, I know sometimes life gets in the way of life, right? And I think that unless you're having that intentionality of like, hey, like, whoa, let's just take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and just take a moment and think about what happened it's really easy that you go through stretches of period of time. Like it always says, like if you drove home and you forgot what you drove, like that can happen. I mean, I know sometimes it happens to me for a day or a couple of days. It's like, whoa, what happened this week? It's Thursday, you know? I guess, wouldn't it be kind of a slippery slope if it wasn't black and white with the 5? Because then you're always going to be okay with not hitting them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm like a black and white guy though, so I guess
yeah. I guess that's just how people would ultimately choose to use it. And I'm a believer that you have to take any insight and any sort of tool and determine like how it's going to work best for you. And my hope is that your audience is thinking through like how are they going to take anything that they've listened to today and invested this 30 minutes or so, and determine like how are they going to take it and apply it to their own life. So if they get one element of that, that's great. I think for me, I'm probably more of again a win-loss and looking at those 5, because that to me it really encapsulates that idea of like I'm winning at my professional calling, and I'm winning also in my personal life as well, because there's all 5 of those questions should overlap.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I like those questions, because there is a very clear overlap. We've kind of gone all over the place, and I know kind of need to wrap up. Want to be respectful of time and everything, but is there anything I haven't asked that I should have asked as far as what you do? I mean, you got 10, 12 years of really good experience in one of the few like corporate settings in Asheville, and I'm just curious to know like how is that like living in? I always like laugh like we live in like one of the few, I don't know, at least you can go do business with people here in shorts and a t-shirt, where in other cities like that would be inconceivable, right? Like how do you see that corporate like leadership meld with Asheville like laid back? And I don't know, just how does that coexist, and do you think it's given you helpful perspective? Has it been detrimental? How's that work?
Yeah, I mean, Biltmore is certainly a unique company in the area. We certainly have a more maybe formal approach to things. I'm sitting here across from Rodrigo, who's you're in, like I'm very jealous of what you wear today, and a button up and jeans, and I'm in a suit, and that's just our culture, and that's okay. But I think it's partly that's what's been passed down through the generations for us. But for me, it's more about maybe just the mindset and that this brings to my life every single day. So it almost feels a little silly to say, but I mean, it's that idea like that you suit up. You suit up every day. I can give you those 5 questions that are focusing questions for me. But that act of like suiting up and saying like I'm putting on my game face. I'm going in to like do what I was called to do, something that I believe I'm gifted for and that I really enjoy. But it shifts my mindset, as I'm preparing for the day. So no matter whether you're putting on a suit or you get to come to work and a button up and and some jeans, which is really great. Like, are you suiting up and like actually heading into your day with a game face on?
Right.
And the idea that you are moving forward and seeking to live like a whole, full, and abundant life that suits your goals.
Yeah, I think I like that. Just that I think sometimes I know I used to try to work from home. So comfortable, and just knowing that I had an office to go to was like such a good like light switch on off. Like, okay, in the office work. So I guess what you're saying is when you put your suit on, it's like, okay, time to game face on, go to work and whatnot. So it helps make that transition effective. Yeah. Last question? What is the one thing that you feel like people should ask you more about leadership that they don't, or what is the one thing that maybe you do get asked a lot about, but you think is the most important thing to talk about?
Yeah, so it probably comes back to, as I was referring to this idea of that, the tossing a stone out into a lake and that ripple effect. And so really beginning with the idea of self-knowledge, self-awareness, and then self-leadership, and that progression all the way up to like ultimately what you would hope would be a global impact and like a legacy that you would leave for the world. And that, one day when your grandkids are describing, you, that they're talking about somebody that they really looked up to that had a really positive impact on the world. Like, so that's a much bigger element. But like within that concept, very few people are asking me about those first 3 stages of self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-leadership. And quite honestly, it's because I think many of them are afraid of the answers. and to really have to deal with, for some of them, their demons and their blind spots. And it's a lot easier to kind of just do business as usual, especially if you've been super successful. I think about it, especially for your entrepreneurial audience and those that are listening that are all CEOs of their company. And it's great if you hang out with a lot of their CEOs, you can get a lot of really good ideas and a lot of founders of other companies. But it's also maybe there could be plenty of posturing there. Everybody's just trying to make themselves and their brand look as good as it possibly can, and so they're not spending maybe enough time with a deep, thorough self-assessment to understand their blind spots as well as their strengths, so that they could close those and also leverage those strengths to really be the very best version of themselves that they could possibly be. And until they spend time on that, doing that deep work, they're never going to fill the potential, and their businesses will never see their full potential. There's always going to be a lid there until you do that deep work.
I think, that thank you for expressing that so well. Good reminder for us, obviously, as we kind of hinted on. And I know I said that was going to be the last. This will be the last. Just want to. I don't have a ton of experience with employees and teams and things like that. A lot of people don't in the real estate world, because just in general, there's a lot of 1-2-man teams, and that's kind of where. But what's the number one thing you would say to somebody who's working on trying to show up for their employees in the best way, to get the best out of them and to help their employees grow and be their best version inside of their company and organization?
Yeah. I think it probably begins with just a recognition that leadership is certainly a two-way street. And it's one thing for you to sit down with that first employee that you might hire and say, here's your job description, and here's what I need you to do. And you walk through those expectations, and clarity of expectations is huge. I mean, you can't hold someone to a standard that's not been clearly articulated. But what if you were to, on the flip side, look at that and say to that employee when they come in, say, hey, I want to paint a picture for you of what it might be like for you to, be here on this team. And I want you to paint a picture for me. So you share that on your end as the owner and the founder, but to ask the employee to really share that and say, okay, well, hey, if you're doing something that really, again, it lights you up, it brings you that sense of accomplishment and joy every single day, kind of ticks off those 5 boxes, and we're making so much money, that it's money is a secondary concern. And if at the end of your career with me and with this company, you're able to look back and to say, hey, the money was great, but what I really look back on in this 30, 40-year career I might have had with you and this team, what was most valuable was the experience that I got, how I was shaped as an individual and as a leader, and the money was all secondary, because I'm now a fuller version of myself, a more complete version of myself. And to say okay, well, if that was accurate, if that was the vision, that's where you want to be. I mean, we'd all love that. What would your expectations be of me as a leader? So you paint that picture and then hear from that employee, okay, what are they bringing to the table as far as what they're looking for? And then you are able to dig into, their needs for motivation, their needs for recognition, their needs for communication, not just assuming that they want to be communicated with in the way that, you ultimately communicate. So many, it's that idea to meet people where they are. Just each of those elements, especially as you're just beginning to build a small team and you're trying to start to form a culture, that matters, and that leadership is certainly a two-way street. So I mean, those types of conversations really will help you not only find the right people, they'll help you keep the right people, and hopefully help your business grow. And you can't reproduce yourself, right? So you're ultimately trying to reproduce those exceptional elements of yourself through your team. Right. And those kind of conversations help you get there.
Awesome. Thank you for both of those answers, Chris. Really quickly, what's the best way for somebody to connect with you or reach out to you if they're interested in the services, as I guess is it consulting, business coaching, whatever the proper term is, that you all provide as far as doing the leadership and team building and whatnot?
Yeah, so on the external side of things, again, with the Biltmore Center for Professional Development, which is where we deliver our learning development programs and consulting services, I'd encourage you just to check out biltmore.com/training. Okay. And we would love to connect with anyone from your audience to learn more about that, or just to chat about where they are and where they want to go.
Cool. All right, Chris. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Real pleasure giving us some eureka moments personally for myself sitting here. So that was good. So thank you for the wisdom and for pushing me as well. And yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I mean, brought me tons of joy. So appreciate the opportunity.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope to see y'all next Tuesday. As a reminder, every Tuesday episode of Asheville Real Estate News. And if you've enjoyed these episodes, please give us a rating and just a review there in iTunes. It just really helps. Appreciate it, y'all, and see you all next week.